we will be having Dongjun Kim and Jongseong Kim. So Dongjun is an offensive security researcher at Enki White Hat who has reported multiple vulnerabilities in Windows and Apple software. He currently focuses on Windows exploitation and fuzzing. Jongseong is a security researcher at Enki White Hat and Ajo University who has identified many Windows vulnerabilities. He has also presented in Code Blue on the topic of Windows kernel driver fuzzing. Today, they will be presenting Completely Unplanned, a window bug hunter's journey to LPE. Let's give them a warm round of applause to welcome them on stage.
Thanks for being here. We are very excited to be presenting at the OPION conference. Today, we are going to talk about Completely Unplanned, a Windows bug hunter's journey to LPE. In this talk, we will share how we ended up analyzing the COM component object model and how we by chance found the vulnerability. Before we start our talk, we would like to introduce ourselves. I'm Jongseong Kim, and the other speaker is Dongjun Kim. We work as security researchers at Enki White Hat. What brought us together is our shared passion for Windows offensive security. Here is the outline for today's talk. First, we will talk about why we decided to focus on a component object model and briefly explain what COM is. Next, we will talk about how we approached finding vulnerabilities in a field that was new to us and share the vulnerabilities we discovered during our journey. Finally, we will wrap up the presentation. First, let us explain why we became interested in Windows LPE. Windows is one of the most widely used operating systems in the world, and it has long been a major target for both attackers and security researchers. Because of its large code base, complex architecture, and various permission models, Windows has a structure that can lead to many types of vulnerabilities. Among them, privilege escalation vulnerabilities have been a high priority research topic for a long time. They are often used not only to gain zip level access, but also to escape Sandbox. Modern exploit chains often need to combine multiple vulnerabilities to cross security boundaries rather than relying on a single bug. Many vulnerabilities have traditionally focused on the Windows kernel. Key components include anti-OS kernel, InsertK, and Windows device drivers. These components have long been common target for attacks, which led Microsoft to release many patches and add strong security mitigations. Because of this, finding new kernel vulnerability has become harder and harder for attackers and security researchers. In this situation, researchers naturally started looking for new escalation paths. We also began with a simple question. Are there still ways to gain higher privileges outside the traditional kernel attack vector? During this process, we focus on components that are accessible from low privilege users, but internally run with higher privileges than the client. We mainly look for targets with the following features. First, services that run with system privileges. Second, services that can be accessed by low privilege users, such as AppContainer. Based on these conditions, we started analyzing the Windows architecture. During that process, we came across something interesting, COM, the component object model. We discovered that some COM and Windows runtime service let normal users talk to higher privilege process. That small clue gave us a clear direction for our research. This was the beginning of our journey, which we ended up naming Completely Unplanned. Many of the Windows features we use every day are built on COM. Windows Explorer, Microsoft Office, Windows Firewall, and the Speech API are run off the top of COM. So, what exactly is COM? COM consists of many different components and concepts. But if we go too deep, it might get a bit boring. So, in this presentation, we will keep it simple and focus only on what we really need to know. The definition of COM, and COM server types, how data is transferred in COM, and the COM threading model. Let's start with the basic. Before we began analyzing COM vulnerabilities, we needed to understand exactly what COM is. COM is a component-based software architecture designed by Microsoft. It allows different processes or modules to create objects and exchange data with each other. One of the biggest advantages of COM is that it provides a common interface useful from many programming languages, including C++, PowerShell, and Python. For example, using PowerShell or Python, we can insert data into Excel through COM. It doesn't matter which language we use. The code looks different, but under the hood, they all interact with Excel the same way using COM. So how is it even possible? Let's take a look at what's happening behind the scenes. COM identifies objects using series ID and IID. A series ID is used to create a COM object. An IID is used to access a specific interface of that object. After the object is created, the client uses the IID to get the functions it needs. Even across different programming languages, they use the same interface to call the COM object. So, if we can use Excel features through COM, like we showed earlier, how do we know where the COM object actually runs and what privilege it has? The way a COM server runs can be divided into three main types. We will introduce two of them in the next slide. First, there is the in-process server model. This is called the in-proc server model and is implemented as a DLL. When you use a COM object through in-proc server, it runs inside the same process as the client. Because of this, it operates with the same privileges as the client. Simply put, your process loads the DLL that contains the COM server and use it directly. And second, there is the out-of-process server model. This is also called the local server model as implemented as an exe. Unlike the in-proc server, the local server runs in a separate process. Because of this, the client access is controlled by the security settings of the COM server. Most of the time, Windows hosts these COM servers inside svchost.exe, which runs background service. Since the client sends requests to another process, the local server uses a proxy and stop. We will explain that part later. Now we have covered the COM server models. Next, since we analyzed the local server that runs with different privileges from the client, we needed to understand how COM actually transfers data between the client and the server. In simple case, like the in-proc server model, COM objects communicate within the same process, so data transfer is straightforward. But in models like local server or remote server, the client and server run in different processes or even on different machines. In this case, COM needs an extra mechanism to handle communication. This is where proxy, stop, and marshalling come into play. When a client needs to call an object in another process, it doesn't call the COM object directly. Instead, it sends the request through the proxy, and the server receives it through the stop. The proxy performs marshalling and sends the data to the server. The stop receives the data, performs a marshalling, and calls the actual method. The result is then returned to the client along the same path. So, what exactly is marshalling, and why is it even there? Marshalling is the process of converting data from one process so that it can be used by another process. In COM, marshalling follows the rules defined in the IDL. It transforms both the interface and its parameter into a format that can be sent over RPC. Unlike general serialization, COM marshalling includes not just simple data types, but also complex objects like interface pointer and runtime object. Unmarshalling is the reverse process. It takes the marshaled data and reconstructs it into its original structure, so the receiving process can use it just like the original object. To work correctly, the unmarshaled data must match the original. For this reason, both sides must follow the types and order defined in the IDL. Finally, we will take a quick look at COM threading model before wrapping up this chapter. In COM, the concept of an apartment is used to define the execution context between threads and to manage thread synchronization. COM objects use different apartment models depending on their specific needs. In COM, there are two mainly threading models. STA is a model where only one thread belongs to an apartment. A COM object inside an STA can only receive method calls from the single thread that belongs to that apartment. Also, the COM runtimes ensure thread safety internally, so when implementing a COM interface in STA, you don't need to handle thread synchronization yourself. MTA allows multiple threads to run within an apartment. COM object inside an MTA can receive method call from multiple threads at the same time. Because of this, the COM server must handle thread synchronization for the object very carefully. If not properly handled, this can lead to issues like race conditions. Alright, we have now covered the basic background of COM. Now, let's talk about how we started looking for vulnerability in COM. Before jumping into vulnerability discovery, we first reviewed previous research on COM vulnerabilities. We searched through academic papers, and we found two studies that stood out to us. The first one is detecting union type confusion in component object model, also known as confusion. The second is COM race, detecting data race vulnerabilities in COM object. First, let me introduce confusion. The confusion paper highlights that improper use of union types and variant structures can lead to critical type confusion in COM. You might already be familiar with union types, but variant structure might feel a bit less familiar. A variant is a structure that contains a VT field, which specifies the actual data types, and a second field that holds the corresponding data. To use a variant safely, the server must always check the VT field first, and then read the correct data field based on the type. If this step is skipped or implemented incorrectly, it can lead to a type confusion vulnerability. What you might wonder, when sending requests to an auto-process server or a remote server, isn't the data always interpreted correctly because of marshalling and unmarshalling? The answer is no. Marshalling and unmarshalling follows the rules defined in the IDL, but they don't validate the internal contents of a variant structure. So if the COM server doesn't properly check variant structures, a type confusion vulnerability can still occur. Alright, now let's take a look at the next paper, COM race. The COM race paper explains race conditions that can occur in COM object running in an MTA model. It also describes how the researchers built a tool to detect these issues and uncovered several vulnerabilities. One interesting finding from this research was that some of the vulnerabilities follow a specific pattern. For instance, this code shows the point where CVE 2020-1146 occurs. If you look closely, the The put as data method is called on the object, and it triggers the set function of the hstring class. Inside the set function, the field stored in this is first freed using Windows delete string function, and then reassigned using Windows duplicate string function. At first glance, this code looks fine. However, in an MTA model, two threads can enter put as data method at the same time, and both call Windows delete string function. This can lead to a double free bug. Through these two studies, we learned that type confusion can happen with variant structures, and that race conditions can occur in the MTA model. We thought both papers were very impressive. At first, we were ready to move on with this insight, but when we checked when the vulnerabilities were found, we noticed something interesting. Although more than 30 vulnerabilities were reported in the two papers, almost all of them were discovered around 2020. Also, since the implementation in confusion and COM race were manually created, we began to wonder if there was something the earlier researchers might have missed. So in our own research, we mainly focused on the local server model and the MTA threading model, where we expected to find new cases of time confusion and race condition. With the question in mind, we began our first COM bug hunting journey. At the end of our research, our other speaker, Dongjun Kim, will introduce unexpected vulnerability we discovered.
Okay, now I take it from here. My name is Dongjun Kim. From this point on, I walk you through the vulnerabilities we discovered during our bug hunting journey. To give you a quick preview, by the end of this journey, we reported over 10 vulnerabilities to MSRC and successfully on several CVEs. Among them, we selected 4 particular interesting vulnerability to introduce today. Here's the list for today's 4 bugs we'll be covering. Let's move on to the first vulnerability. This vulnerability is a type confusion issue that occur in Windows Language Experience Service. The vulnerability is triggered in set language operation state method of an internal class called Device Language Manager. The set language operation state method takes 4 parameters, and the first parameter is a pointer to the variant structure provided by the user. At step 1 and step 2, step 1 and step 1 and step 2, the method store the VT field and the associated data field into V12 and V12 plus 8 respectively. Later, the data is passed as the third argument to the set language operation state in registry method, where it is used without proper validation. In the set language operation state in registry method, if A2 is 0 at step 1, the method stores the user provided variant data field into the data variable at step 2. Then the address of data is passed as a 6th argument to the set reg value function. Let's take a quick review with the MSN documentation. The regset key value function is used to create or modify under the specific registry key. In other words, at this point, the status registry key is updated by writing 4 bytes of data from the variance data field that we provided. But doesn't something seem strange here? If you think back to the code we've seen so far, we will notice that the A2 is 0 in the set language operation state in registry method. There is no validation of variance data type at all. Now, what would happen if variance type was something like BSTR, which holds the pointer instead of simple integer? This is exactly where type confusion occurs. Instead of writing an integer value like 0 or 1, the lower 4 bytes of pointer address are written into registry key. Since this registry path is readable from low integrity, it allows an attacker to read lower 4 bytes of pointer address. Personally, I think this was a really interesting vulnerability. Although the MSRC determined that the report did not meet their bar for immediate security servicing, they committed to addressing the issue in the future version. But actually, MSRC told us to say this. The next vulnerability is a double-free bug found in Windows Update Stack. The vulnerability occurred in the put cross-gen set ID method of an internal class called fulfillment data info. To trigger the vulnerable function, we first need to call the create fulfillment data method of the install control class, which will return iFulfillment data info object. The condition for obtaining this object is very simple. At step 1, it checks whether the length of the string we provided as A2 is exactly 12. If the condition is met, the object is created as step 2 and returned to the client. Now let's take a look at the put cross-gen set ID method of the fulfillment data info object. At step 1, a method loads the h-string variable stored at this plus 200 into v3. Then at step 2, it frees the memory pointed to by v3. As I mentioned in previous presentation, I can see that this is the same race condition pattern as CB 2020 1146. This is very similar to CB 2020 1146, which was previously introduced in COM-race paper. Even after 5 years, vulnerability following the same pattern still remain. This was the moment when our initial suspicions, based on prior work, turned into certainty. There are still many types of race condition vulnerabilities left to be discovered. Great. To hunting the race condition vulnerability, we turned our attention to print workflow user service, the service that is responsible for managing the window print workflow. In this component, we are able to discover several vulnerabilities. Among them, we introduced two most interesting cases. The first vulnerability is a use after free issue. It occurred in setPrintTicket method of C workflow session object. Look at the code. We can see that this plus 10 holds the heap address that was allocated during previous call to setPrintTicket. However, because C workflow session COM interface belong to the multi-thread apartment model, the object can be accessible concurrently by different threads. Since there is no proper locking mechanism in place, a race condition can be occurred, potentially reading use after free or double free bug. We attempt to exploit this vulnerability, but due to several constraints, we are not able to achieve this successful exploitation. However, based on our analysis, we believe that with certain techniques and ideas, exploitation can be conceptually possible. First, let's talk about the bypass ASLR. In the case of ASLR, if the attacker controlled process and higher privileged process load the same DLL, the DLL will be mapped at the same virtual address in the both process. This idea is the common idea for the other LPE or MOSES or sandbox escape technique using IPC mechanism. If we have some corrupted virtual function table, we can do any kind of classic pawn technique such as RP, stack pivoting, or any other else. Second, we need a rig sum heap address. Since C workflow session object exposed several other methods, I checked whether any of them could access the this plus 10 address. Eventually, I found a function that does exactly that. By using the getPrintTicket method, we can copy the value located at this plus 10, which may already have been freed into COM output buffer. In other words, we can leak the useful heaps address through the following scenario. First, we need a 3-thread. Each thread will call different COM interface method as illustrated in diagram. In thread 2, if value already existed at this plus 10, calling setPrintTicket will free the heap memory that was previously allocated there. Then, before new allocation occurs, thread 3 may allocate an object such as one containing a free table, a virtual function table, or any heap address into the free space. After that, when thread 1 calls getPrintTicket, it will reference this plus 10 address, effectively leaking the value from the victim object back to the attacker. Since the size field for heap allocation can be fully controlled through the setPrintTicket method, we can reliably place victim object into freed hole within the race window without any size restriction. Next, we move to the RIP control. Again, 3 threads are used. Unlike the previous leak scenario, here 2 of the threads start race by both calling set print ticket. First, if the this plus 10 is not a null, set print ticket will free the heap memory stored there. During the window, an attacker can allocate an arbitrary object to occupy the freed hole. After that, the attacker can overwrite the victim object with fully controlled data and size. If the victim object contains a virtual function table, this can be read successful control flow hijacking. Even though we came up with these ideas, we are not able to develop fully working exploit. We'd encounter several challenges. First, even if we successfully allocated a victim object into freed space through the race condition and managed it to overwrite it, it was extremely difficult to avoid double free situation. Second, because both threads must call the same interface to trigger the race, and the race window is extremely narrow. A precise control over the timing was very difficult to achieve. Although we are not successful, but you could make it happen. Now, we would like to introduce the final vulnerability. Just like the previous case, this vulnerability was also found in print workflow user service. Let's take a closer look at the request spring handle for write method of the iPrint support source session class. The methods take 6 parameters from P0 to P5, and all of them are used as the output parameter. Now, let me ask, when you are hunting for a bug, do you usually bother analyzing functions that you have no input parameter at all? Our answer was no, at least until we discovered this vulnerability. In this function at step 1, the address of workflow session common virtual function table, which is stored in this, is loaded into V9. Then using this address as an argument, the request spring handles for write method of the workflow session common class is called at step 2. In this method at step 1, it retrieves the client's PID. At step 2, it obtains a handle to the client's process. Then at step 3, it references this again through V22 and stores some value. Finally, at step 4, it calls duplicate handle function. Now it's time to see what duplicate handle function really works. The duplicate handle function is Windows API that duplicates a handle to an object. To briefly summarize the function arguments, the first and second parameter are the handles to the source process and handle to be duplicated respectively. The third parameter is the handle to target process that will receive the duplicated handle, and fourth parameter is where the newly duplicated handle will be returned. According to MSDN documentation, this operation effectively means that the handle from V22 inside print workflow user service is duplicated into the client process. While this pattern can sometimes be seen in COM, it usually used to return events handles to client process for implementing callbacks or method notifications. Without having high expectation, we decide to reverse engineering the source of the V22 value. Through analysis, we found that it is initialized in constructor of print support session class. The v22 value is set to -1. In Windows, handle value of -1 represents a pseudo handle that points to the current process itself. This means that in the duplicate handle call, the handle of print workflow user service process is duplicated into the client process. In other words, if the lower privileged client calls this method, it can successfully duplicate the print workflow user service process handle into its own process. Next, we checked which process could access print workflow user service by reviewing its access permission. As a result, we found that this COM object is accessible not only by all UWP app, but also by lower privileged AppContainer process that have specific capabilities. This means that even a sandbox process can duplicate the print workflow user service process handle into its own process. This is truly perfect logic bug. There is no need to exploit the complex use-after-free vulnerabilities we discussed earlier presentation. Now, by using the duplicated process handle, we can write a shellcode into memory space of print workflow user service and executed it by any kind of shellcode execution technique, such as create remote thread API or any other else. Now it's a demo time. To demonstrate the vulnerability, we assume the compromised renderer in the Adobe Acrobat Sandbox and perform the sandbox escape by injecting shellcode. Achieving it's back. To achieving the privilege escalation from the AppContainer to medium integrity level. Look at the screen. You can see that the Adobe was executed with AppContainer. Next, we injected the exploit code into the renderer through the SRDI technique for stable exploit code execution. As soon as the attack is carried out, we can see the normal medium privileged CMD process is running. And for proof, the privilege was verified through the whoami/group command. We actually reported this bug with a full exploit code. Surprisingly, the bug was declared exploit less likely. We still don't know why the MSRC made this decision. Although this bug could be triggered on the current version of Windows, it could not reproduce on Canary version, so we did not receive any bounties from MSRC. Finally, here's our conclusion. From 2024 until now, we reported more than 10 vulnerabilities to Microsoft, including tie confusion and race condition issue, and we successfully earned CVEs from our findings. These achievements were made possible thanks to the information shared by previous researchers and availability of outstanding tools like olreview.net. We would especially like to express our deep gratitude to earlier researchers and to the James Bosher, who laid the foundation that allow us to begin our journey into COM vulnerability research. Finally, before we close, we would like to share some reflection from our journey. We believe that through analysis of prior research is essential when trying to discover a new vulnerability in the new domain. It is important to not to simply follow existing research, but to focus on the area that were not fully explored and to seek out possibility for further expansion. Of course, there were some regrets as well. Although we are able to discover several race condition vulnerability, we are not able to achieve complete exploitation in some case, and we recognize this is an area we need to improve moving forward. For our future work, we aim to develop systematic tools for detecting these types of vulnerability patterns. Thank you for listening our talk. The QR on the left is our official company website, and the one on the right is to our technical blog. Today's presentation contents is also available on the technical blog, so feel free to check it out. This is the end of the presentation. Thank you.
So thank you very much for your talk. Does anyone in the audience have any questions? So anyone has any questions? Okay, so I guess I have one question. So I guess when you are doing vulnerability research, are there like anything specific that you look out for in the vulnerability research process? So in terms of methodology.
Please, again.
So in terms of your research methodology, is there like anything specific that you would look out for? Like when you are like analyzing these like drivers or like any target that you're looking at?
Principle, okay. I didn't exactly understand the question.
Okay, so when you're doing research, like what is the most important thing that you are looking out for when you're trying to find bugs?
We think there is some rocky issue that we are audit that code, that there is no guarantee for there is a bug. So do not stop audit your bug to be continue to when you are get your bug and then get into your bug bounty. It is important to keep researching, no retire.